Cool. Well, thank you very much for coming in today, mate. This have you done a podcast before?
Oh, not like this.
Not like this? Oh, so what other ones have you done?
Couple of
Yeah.
mates. Do you remember Dave Flowers?
Yes, yeah.
Dave Flowers reached out. Did a conversation with him in my living room on
Yeah.
my laptop. And Tom Merriman's brother,
Okay.
Johnny.
Yeah.
He ran a podcast for quite some time. I think I had a conversation with him.
Yeah.
On there.
Yeah.
But, this is
The most professional.
without a doubt. Yeah.
Well, welcome, mate. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you on. So, as we just spoken off air, I want to get people in and have conversations and pull whatever we can out of the conversation and hopefully get some good content for you. I know you said that One Playground have been on you to improve the marketing on your brand and the rest of it. So you're not obviously a man to talk too much about yourself, but hopefully today we get a little bit out of it. And the goal is everybody has a story and a personality that short form social media just can't show. So we see snapshots of whatever it is, and it's more like a highlight reel and it's not realistically the person. And I think everybody has a story that will particularly lead you to the position where you are. That's obviously the way everything goes. And for us, it's ultimately probably going to impact who we help in our line of work, from obviously a personal training standpoint, but obviously to where you've got with your career and, doing the management and stuff like that. So, and obviously you're probably one of the more influential people in my life, and I probably wouldn't have got to this point if it wasn't for you. So thank you very much for that. And it's going to be pretty cool to have a conversation in this format. Hopefully we get some good stuff about it. So I guess we'll get started with tell us a little bit about us. Tell us a little bit about you and where you're from and sort of how you got started.
So originally Northern England.
Yeah.
From Lancashire. So, not that there's many people in the organisation that aren't from the UK, but it's sort of about an hour north of Manchester.
Yep.
I was working as a youth worker when
Yep.
I came out of university.
How'd you get into that?
A house party. Yeah, so I went to university and I studied sports studies and creative writing.
Okay. Yeah.
So it was a joint degree, and no one else at the university did that degree. In fact, they weren't going to let me do the degree. I just sort of got in touch with the university, and I was like, "Hey, I want to do these two things."
Yeah.
And they were like, "Okay, maybe, but before we let you do this, I want you to write an essay
Okay.
about why these two subjects and why you want to combine them." And I remember the essay. I remember writing about how I thought the language and sport or exercise movement were like two of the biggest catalysts for personal development, growth.
Yeah.
And that was what the whole essay was about.
Yep.
20 years later, I'm still figuring out how true that is. But I mean, you can sort of see where it originated because I'm obviously very interested and passionate about the communication and the coaching language side of what we do, and have a huge belief that exercise and fitness are catalysts for helping people make better decisions.
Absolutely.
Which is one of the things that I love about our career and our industry. But anyway, they eventually let me in, and I studied these two things. And for the whole 3 years, I was just doing the two things that I enjoyed the most and were most interested in. I had no idea what I was going to do coming out of it. I've been sports coaching since I was like 14. So coaching gymnastics primarily. So that's always been kind of like in the background. And one of the roles that I had while I was at university, I was working as a gymnastics coach with kids that were sort of like 8 through to 16 maybe. So I'd been coaching young people for a while. And then a friend of mine who was at a house party with us was telling me about this role that she had working for Prince's Trust, I think it was, which is basically a charity-based program in the UK where it's like 8 weeks long, 12 weeks long, and they take groups of young people and they just upskill them in different ways. Anyway, this organization that ran that also was running a project called Breakthrough. And this was for 14 to 16-year-olds that had been completely kicked off the school roster for behavioural problems. Mm-hmm. Right? So first job out of university, it was kids that no school would have back. And the whole idea of the project was they were with us for, I think, like a year at a time. And we would just try to get them upskilled in whatever way that we could. Mm-hmm. So we'd get them, accreditations in all sorts, from cooking lessons through to kayaking.
Yeah.
I got my snorkeling level 1 out of this program or something crazy like that. But it was just that they had things to take to employers and be like, all right, I made mistakes, but I've done this to show that I can grow, I can be reliable.
Yeah.
And
that's obviously a big thing as kids as well too, with school. Obviously, school has to have some sort of parameters to it, and it obviously doesn't fit a lot of people. I know I was one that, my brother and sister are academics and I was not at all, but I knew that fitness was the thing for me. From 15 or 16, I wanted to be a PT, but I didn't do really good in the other subjects.
No, and we know more now about learning, education, and how difficult an environment it can be, a traditional school environment for some young people. And that was just one of the things we saw.
Yeah.
These guys that wouldn't sit in a classroom and that structured environment would, be great at carpentry or would be great at, the physical activity side of things. Anyway, that program led to another program where they asked me to go into schools and then try and get the worst behaved kids to not get kicked out of schools. So the next program was 3 schools in a district, mm-hmm. and I'd get one class made up of all the worst behaved kids of those schools, and then I ran a program for a few hours a week with them, trying to do similar things, educate them in alternative ways.
Yeah. How's that? That probably explains the patience.
Yeah, it set me up well for managing personal trainers, more so than I realised at the time. But you just paid attention. I had a kid with Tourette's. I remember that was the first time I worked with Tourette's. That just sort of not being knocked off or not allowing him to feel as though the interruptions were breaking the flow of the class.
Yeah.
People that did not want to sit still. I remember a young lad who'd just put his hand up and go for a run around the car park every 30 minutes or something, and then he'd sit down and then he'd be able to listen again.
Yeah, so PTs.
Yeah, like PTs, yeah.
Starting to make a lot more sense the way that you structure developments now.
There you go, mate. The last project that I worked on with that charity was a sports initiative. Mm-hmm. So when that came up, I got really excited about that opportunity, and that was to go into these low economic areas in the north of England, mm-hmm. and try and establish sporting initiatives to try and bring down youth crime, pretty mm-hmm. much. So, stabbing each other, dealing drugs, getting pregnant, whatever it was that was
an easy gig.
things that we didn't want.
Yeah.
And then we would try and combat that with ping pong clubs. So we did all sorts. We went into schools and did sports coaching. So rugby, football, basketball, athletics, boxing. We'd set up basketball clubs in these urban areas where one. A little bit off topic, but we went to. We used to do these basketball nights in one of these neighborhoods, and one evening we turned up and someone had stolen the floodlights. The floodlights were just gone, and we had to cancel it. And for a few weeks, we couldn't do anything. And it turns out someone had stolen the floodlights and then used them to create a grow. We're just growing cannabis plants in a little
economics.
Yeah, I mean, if they showed half of the initiative, on another project, they would have done great.
Yeah,
but,
right.
I always remember that. So anyway, we did this for a year and a half, 2 years, whatever it was, and I got a lot from it. I learned a lot from it. I think I was with that charity for about 4 years. And really what I wanted to do at the time is I was trying to bolster my application for the fire service.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was in that process. I was pretty set that's what I was going to do.
Yep.
And then the 2008 recession hit. That's how old I am. And they just stopped recruiting firemen. And I think it's like 16,000 firemen lost their jobs.
Wow.
Yeah, in that period. So I was like, we'll do something else now.
Yeah. What was the reason for that?
For the 2008 economic crisis.
Getting rid of the firemen.
Just
Surely there's still
budget,
fires in
budget cuts, I think, man. I might be completely, misremembering that information, but it stuck with me for a long time.
Yeah,
But they stopped recruiting because they had to let a lot of people go at that time.
Yeah, wow.
So I think I was like 24 at
Yep.
this point. I was like, oh, well, I'll have a gap here, just wait for this economic crisis thing to blow over.
Yeah.
And I took a brochure home to the share house I was in at the time. So I said, my housemates thinking about this. And it was a couple. And they just looked at each other and just pretty much agreed on the spot. And this was the July.
Yeah.
And we flew out in the September.
Yeah.
I think I had like $1,000 in the bank.
When you got here?
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, right.
It didn't go very far in Sydney. Had 2 years in Australia on a working holiday.
Yeah.
Just moving around the country, doing a job to be able to do whatever the next thing was going to be. But in that time, I was just taken aback by the lifestyle, the fitness lifestyle here. I remember the first time I was on the beach at 6 a.m. thinking, like, no one gets up in the UK before 7 a.m.
Yeah.
It's just not a thing.
Yeah.
And I was on the beach at 6 a.m. thinking I was going to be the only person there. I'd have the place to myself. And there was like teams of people doing volleyball practice, swims, runs. I remember the first time I saw the outdoor barbecues.
Yeah.
I was just like, I was like, but when did they get vandalized? And I was like, well, how do, surely that happens overnight sort of thing.
It does out west, mate.
Yeah, okay. I remember the first time I saw the sculptures by the sea.
Yeah.
I was just like, how does this not get stolen or vandalized? Or, I was trying to
it does out west.
Yeah. I was trying to picture that happening in Manchester or Liverpool.
That's a good point. I never thought about that. Stuff doesn't get stolen down here in Sydney like it does in other places, I think.
Yeah, well, that's somewhere I wanted to be, mate. I was like, well.
I remember when Juan got here and how protective he was over his backpack and stuff like that. He'd we'd be at the cafe and he'd go back to the gym and he'd like, can you watch my backpack? And I was like, it's fine, mate. It's okay.
Like, Danny's still like that, don't worry. Saw that and was like, this is something I want to be part of. I actually tried to go home at the end of the first 2 years.
Yeah.
I had 4 of my closest friends get married in the same year. So I was like, this will be a 2-year thing. This economic crisis lark will blow over. I'll go home.
Yeah.
Went home, and I reckon within about 3 months, I realized, nah. Yeah, I need to be over there.
Yeah.
So I set about coming back out. Came back out on a student visa. Did that for a few years, and then eventually, got the gig with Fitness Playground as it was back then when it was opening up.
Yeah.
1 club, 2 floors, 8 staff.
Yeah. What year was that? 2000.
They opened in 2014.
Yeah.
And I came on board in January 2015. So I was about 6 months after it opened.
Yeah.
10th anniversary.
Yeah.
This year.
Yeah. Well, I think this April's 7 years since I've been there, which is crazy to think.
It's changed a lot.
Yeah.
So much. Most things, anyway.
Yeah. There's a good bit of Surrey, particularly upstairs, that's been the same since. Which is nice it's still the same. Like it's holding on to that FP part of it almost.
Yeah.
But that's crazy. And so you've been there for 9.5 years.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Much, yeah.
And that's your first PT job?
Yeah. Yeah. So up until then, it had just been sort of working as a sports coach.
Yeah.
I put a lot of what I consider strengths in my PT business down to that early exposure to gymnastics coaching.
Yep.
Because everything happened so fast.
Yeah.
You just learned to develop that eye really quickly. You had to sort of get that blueprint of what you were seeing and lay it over what was there in the blink of an eye. And they're usually quite complicated movements. And then the work with the young people as a youth worker from an organizational standpoint, and then just from how to communicate and how to manage yourself in the interactions. I think a lot of those things carried over, and then I did have a background from university. A lot of that course was the science element of it, so anatomy and physiology too. Those things kind of came together. I had a light bulb moment when I was back in that gap year. Sorry, that year where I went back to the UK, where I was like, no, that's it. Just like the penny dropped. I was like, that's the thing I want to do. It's at that proactive end, and that was my first personal training job.
Yep. Here. Yeah. So what got you? So did you start? So you come back to Sydney, and then you started at FP?
No, so I came back and did the. I probably looking back could have done like RPL and looked at recognition of prior learning. For the Cert 3 and Cert 4 through the sports coaching badges and the degree. But I needed a visa. So I did a student visa for Cert 3, Cert 4, and then a diploma in fitness. And it was towards the end of the Cert 4, I was like reaching out to gyms, being like, hey, I'm about to finish my Cert 4. I just wanted to introduce myself. Knowing now what it's like getting applications and stuff, it makes me chuckle. But I had a tutor who knew, I can't remember how he knew about Fitness Playground, but one of the tutors at the college I was at was kind of like, hey, you should go talk to these people. So I was doing like fencing. So I was like putting up fences.
Right.
Yeah, just digging holes in concrete and laying down fences. That's awful. I had some awful jobs, mate.
What's the worst?
Worst job. There was a job in Darwin. Where we got there and we signed up with an agency, and they were like, "What do you do?" I was like, we're labourers pretty much. And they went, "Right, cool. We've got some night shifts for you." I'm like, "All right, you get paid a bit more. It's 12-hour night shift, cool." And it was cleaning an industrial conveyor belt. So they have these conveyor belts in Darwin where they load the minerals from the trucks up this 200-meter long conveyor belt that fires it into the back of the cargo ships. And then after that's done, because they need different, they do different minerals, right? So they can't get them contaminated with each other. So they send in a crew afterwards to clean it, basically. And it was 2 teams of 3, one on either side of this thing. One person had a hose pipe, just blowing it down. One person had a brush, was cleaning everything. And then the other person had this like huge vacuum suction thing to suck up all the water. And you were it's 35 degrees. It was in the wet season or getting into the wet season. So it was like anywhere up to 90% humidity. You were in a hazmat suit and you had a respiratory mask and you did 6 hours and then you broke for half an hour and then you did another 6 hours through the night. You couldn't talk to each other because of the respiratory masks. You were in ankle deep water the whole time. So my feet looked like scrambled eggs wrapped in cling film by the end of it. And everything you were cleaning was like this dark mineral, and it just got stained on your skin. It was everywhere. Anyway, we lasted a week. And we got to the end of this week and this guy from the agency rang me and he goes, we're moving you on to another job. And he was like, we're going to put you on next to the beach, building villas for the casino.
Oh, perfect.
I was like, that sounds great.
Yes.
That sounds brilliant. And he goes, well, if you lads can do a week on that job, we'll give you any work you want. I was like, all right. Is that unusual? He's like, we haven't had anybody make it past a day. And we'd done 7. We'd done a full week, me and these lads I was traveling with. So he, gave us this pretty sweet gig after this, just next to the ocean in an air-conditioned truck, digging holes.
Yeah, that sounds nice. Were you going to continue that job or?
I was using Darwin as a base because this was in my second year of my working holiday visa.
Yeah.
So I do about 2 or 3 months' work, save up a bit of money, and then do a bit on the West Coast. Then come back, save up a bit of money, do Indonesia. Come back, save up a bit of money, do Thailand.
Yeah.
And we just got in with a company that, wanted some reliable labourers to dig holes, you know. So that one stands out in memory.
I bet, mate. I bet. Yeah. But there's good lessons to be learned when labouring. I grew up doing like quite a good bit of labouring for my dad. My work experience was, I did it with my dad, and they didn't want you to do it with your parents because you get let off easy. And it wasn't as hard as what you just explained, but at 16 years old, I dug post holes for 10 hours a day.
You learn a lot about yourself. My grandmother would call it character building.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I remember in my interview with Justin, he said something along the lines of like, it's long days and early starts and stuff. And I remember chuckling in the interview, and they were like, what are you laughing at? And I was like, well, mate, I've been doing 12 hours a day digging holes in the ground.
Yeah.
I actually care about this. I'm passionate about this. Yeah. I'll work all day doing this.
Yeah.
I think that might have been what got me across the line.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. Cool. So we covered what got you into PT. So you've been training for a long time, obviously, with gymnastics. When did you start gymnastics?
6.
Right.
Yeah, I was 6 years old.
Yeah, right.
I remember the period leading up to that. I had a lot of energy. My parents were trying to figure out what to do with me. They put me into, because the actual town that I was born in is different to the town that I grew up in.
Right.
We moved out of Warrington, which is sort of a really heavy rugby league town in the UK.
Did you play rugby league or just rugby?
I played rugby union, but I grew up watching and supporting rugby league.
Rugby league. Which do you prefer?
Probably union, just because it was the one that I got into the deepest. But my first interaction in Warrington was rugby league.
Yeah.
And all I can remember of being there really is like kicking a rugby ball around like a playground when I was like 5.
Yeah.
Anyway, we moved up north, and my mum was trying to find different things for me to do.
Yeah.
And she took me to like one ballet lesson. Thinking back, I wonder what else she was trying to do, but she took me into this lesson, and I just remember this woman telling me to like kneel into a picture frame or imagine I come out of it. I was like, Mum, I don't think this is for me. Being this really self-aware 6-year-old that I am, I don't think this is for me. I'm not going to go back to this one.
What was the movie about the young kid from
Billy Elliot?
Yes, yeah.
Great film.
Yeah.
Yeah, great
Could have
film.
been you, mate.
I didn't think I had quite the elegance or the grace or coordination to make that. My sister was the dancer. He's the dancer. Anyway, they eventually landed on, do you want to try gymnastics? Because one of my uncles, one of my aunties had done it. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, cool. Got into it straight away. Yeah. Ended up training pretty seriously by the time I was 10, probably. I was doing 12 hours a week.
Yeah, okay.
So it was like 3-hour blocks 4 times a week.
Yeah.
Did that right through to 16.
Yeah.
Got hurt pretty badly at 14. Broke my leg in 3 places. And then that's during that recovery period is when I started coaching other athletes and kind of, to be honest, man, realised pretty soon that I enjoyed helping the others probably more than even doing it myself.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, didn't have, not super competitive.
Yeah.
Personally driven.
Yeah.
But not super competitive.
Yeah.
I don't get massively riled up against another person.
Yeah.
Like I've got a pretty high standard for myself moving forward. But yeah, that kind of landed, realised that about myself early on. But I've always enjoyed the structure and the discipline that I gained from doing that level of sport that early.
Yeah, for sure. And gymnastics is obviously one from like a movement capacity standpoint and movement quality standpoint that if you can start something like that as a young kid, it's going to do good for everything.
Yeah, I only have my own experience to go off, but I do think it's one of the best starts.
Yeah.
Especially like male gymnastics.
Yeah.
I think female gymnastics, the kids are probably very different now, but back then they seem to get they have a harder time than what we had, whereas it was kind of expected that guys would grow into the sport.
Yeah.
Whereas to be successful as a female gymnast it happened when they were very young.
Yeah.
So the attitude that it was approached seemed different from what I
Yeah.
observed. But yeah, from my standpoint, it gave me a real strong base.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even to this day now, I still sort of quantify some of my goals in training around some of the things that when I was training, I was like, can I still move my weight through space? Can I still move my body weight through space? And I use that as one of my indicators of fitness.
Yeah,
pretty
for
much,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah. When you start to notice that you could do something or can't do something, it's probably a good, reality check of like, oh, put that back
Well,
into training.
there's plenty of things I can't do that I used to do.
Yeah.
But, I think I'll always have part of me that's like, okay, I should be able to muscle up. I should be able to hold my own body weight. I should be able to, touch my toes to the bar or, some basic calisthenic skills that I like to just touch into every now and then.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, on that, what with training right, like now, and I guess in the past, what excites you the most about the training?
Excites me. I think right now training's pretty much what excites me. It's a good question because it's just such a habit now. It's just become part of like, who I am. My training's my peace of mind. Like it's, I think it's important to have that element of progress, that you can see happening, and that confidence or competence that comes from practicing the skills. But I like, I get excited by progress, I suppose, a new skill or working towards a new goal. I change my focuses each year, sort of thing. So throughout the year, I'll usually have 3 blocks. For the last 4 or 5 years, anyway, I've structured my training so that there's a block of training towards performance, a block towards hypertrophy, and a block towards strength. And I'll just rotate through them. So I'll usually program myself maybe 9 months of the year, and then I'll allow a 3-month sort of grace period where either I'm backing off on training a little bit and just maintaining because of work, or I'm just off program and doing whatever I feel like. And there's about 9 months of the year that's pretty well structured.
What would you say performance and strength? What would you mean to differ those?
So having a strength goal for me has always been something that I suppose from the background I've got I did a bit of athletics, I did a little bit of boxing, and did a little bit of gymnastics. Like I've always a bit of rugby. I've always had different things in there. So the strength goals have been a way to either help me develop muscle or help me develop speed or power, as opposed to necessarily training specifically towards a strength goal.
So what's an example of a performance goal for you, or what are you training for at the moment? What's your training look like?
So I've just moved from doing 3 days conditioning and 2 days strength work into doing 3 days resistance training with 2 days conditioning now. So I've got a day doing boxing. So I'll do 10 rounds on the bags. The forge got four bags now. Got a wrecking ball, a tie bag, like a kick bag, a slip bag, and a speed ball.
Nice.
So I've got my own little boxing gym there now. So I do a day on boxing. I'll do a day running.
Yeah.
And then I'll split my resistance training into a push-pull level.
Nice. You've had a few. You've fought, haven't you, in boxing and kickboxing?
Oh, man, nothing worth writing home about. That was a long time ago. I was looking for some structure when I came out of the gymnastics, sort of like late teens through the early 20s, and just did some classes and some low-level bouts, and then that probably had an influence on my training more than anything else. It's just something it's a form of cardio that I enjoy.
Yeah, fair.
So I've just always tried to keep keep that there. I
Yeah.
think there's a sort of feeling you get from doing a bit of boxing training or knowing how to at least throw a half decent punch or get out of a kick that's useful.
Yeah, I've seen you kick a bag and punch a bag, mate. It's a bit more than half decent. Well, that was actually the thing that I started doing, never formally taught, but I love boxing. That's one of the things that I started doing when I was a young kid, and definitely from like a confidence standpoint. When people don't know that you can do it and then they find out that you can do it, it's a pretty cool feeling that then people don't want to, you know, push you at after they found out, which is quite cool. And that's one of the things that I did that for a long period of time before I started doing. I remember I somehow saw a Muhammad Ali DVD and then was just obsessed. And then all I would do was skip and box and just do that. That was the sort of start to me training.
Yeah, I just think it's such a good all-round way of organising your training. You know, you've got speed, you've got power. I keep that and the running in there just for the rotational components as much as anything.
Yeah.
Making sure that there's rotational elements in training.
Yeah.
But you've got endurance as well.
Yeah.
So the cardiovascular elements, and because it's a skill, you're focused on the quality of the movement.
Yeah.
So there's a lot in there I think can carry over to other areas. So it's a fun modality for everyone. And then in addition to that, you do get the carryover of the confidence and the sort of control and just the funneling of aggression or stress management.
Yeah, for sure.
It's always one of the most, when we did the youth work, it was always one of the most popular things. Hitting the pads was always one of the most popular things with the young people that we were coaching. So there's this sense of effort that you put in, and then everything else that's involved in it that kind of results in this sense of control that you get. I think it was really good for sort of promoting the sort of sense of autonomy.
Yeah, for sure. And it's one of those things that, like, to a certain extent, fighting is built into humans for good reason. And I think particularly for younger kids, young boys, that's why we gravitate usually towards things like rugby and boxing, and having an outlet like that makes a big difference. And one of the things I wanted to chat to you about or talk about was you touched on it, or two things. It's fun, and the focus of it, the focus element of something like that can take away from that it is a fitness-based thing. So for me, something like that is riding the bike and stuff like that. When I'm doing that, you're going so fast that you can't be focusing on anything else, which is cool from like a stress standpoint or stress management standpoint. And then the skill element of it, it's a different thing than we would normally do in the gym when we're squatting, deadlifting, benching, anything like that. And then we'll go to that. Well, actually, a point before that is, and that another thing that you said was, you've done training for such a long period of time, it's just a habit and it's part of you. And that's one of the things that actually all the boys that I've had on so far, we are somewhat lucky to have a big span of training that it is such an ingrained thing into us that if we don't do it, it's probably us not being ourselves. So we're lucky in that regard that it is part of our being, and if we're not doing that, it's not true to ourselves. But one of the things that I see clients struggle with a lot is that they're trying their best to get to a point where they can train, more frequently and have more autonomy and stuff like that. But for a lot of people that haven't had that experience from an athletic standpoint and then also been successful at it, they don't have that privilege to experience that. And so one of the things that I wanted to chat about is, you obviously work with some pretty high functioning individuals as your clients. So tell me what your process is to get people that they might not be like that as well to achieve their goals and continue to progress in that sort of direction.
So a lot of what I do and a lot of what I teach is got its sort of foundations in self-determination theory.
Mm-hmm.
So as you're talking then, I'm seeing that, I don't even know if you remember it from the workshops, but I'm seeing that sort of continuum of motivation that I'm thinking about. And you can consider low quality motivation or less sustainable motivation as something that's more controlled. So something that is dependent more on more extrinsic factors. Now, where it can get a little bit confusing is it's common that people understand that extrinsic factors can be things like punishment and reward. But low quality motivation can also come from extrinsic factors that are things like shame or guilt, which can be painful motivators that get people moving, but not necessarily high quality motivators that keep people sustained in the behavior. Because, the way I think about it is, if you're motivated to action because you're moving away from something, then the motivation only lasts while you're in proximity to the thing that you're moving away from. Whereas if you're moving towards something, the motivation lasts a lot longer as you're moving towards it.
Yeah.
So on this continuum where you've got this lower quality, more controlled motivations, things like punishment, reward, shame, guilt, further down it, you've got areas that have become part of your identity. So, a higher form quality of motivation, which we refer to as like more autonomous motivation, would be, believing in the benefit of it. So if we relate this back to sort of, let's say, weight loss, a person, has a moment where they want to go to the gym because they feel uncomfortable with the way that they look. That may be a powerful enough motivator to get somebody moving, but that might not be a strong enough motivator to keep a person in that behavior.
Yep.
So they're moving away from feelings of shame, feeling of guilt, but they might then, recognize that it's important to the things that they care about. So, that person might be a parent, and they might recognize that being a healthy father figure is important to them. And that would be a higher quality motivation. And then again from that, it might be something like it's become who I am. So, we've identified that this particular activity is part of what makes me me. So, the personal trainer doesn't always rock up with pure intrinsic motivation that that they're doing it just for the enjoyment of the activity themselves, but because over a long period of time, they've reinforced that the activity is important to who they are and what they represent. And this is more autonomous motivation, and then but still extrinsic.
Yes.
And then intrinsic is just reserved for, I'm doing it purely because of the love of the thing or the curiosity of the thing, and the activity itself. So I think a lot of it is understanding, well, where is the person at, along this line? And you can usually pick that up from the language that they're using, the way that they're describing the goal, and how can we coach, use, our questions or our observations or our reinforcements to shift that person slowly towards this more autonomous motivation. I think that almost answered your question.
Yeah. No, it's a really, really good. Obviously, we've looked at that stuff before with the developments, but there's a lot of. It's something that I've been working on recently to improve with my coaching and the consultation and things like that, and then just if we have a check-in with clients and stuff like that, and trying to get better at that. I had a call this morning and was working on things like that, but having a bit more of a zoomed out look at the levels of motivation and things like that. Because I think a lot of times people, there's nothing necessarily special about what doing the exercise itself. Most people that they can't do. Most people are successful in other areas of their life. Like the person I was talking about this morning, they're very successful with their work or they put a lot of time and effort into it, but then they can't, and they are improving with their motivation. to do more of the things that they need to do, but it's just that they can't pull themselves out of one and then apply the same context to another, or they're working towards that, and it's it's hard for people to do.
Yeah, the self-determination as well would sort of like suggest that the way to help people move along that continuum is through the three basic psychological needs: relatedness, competence, and autonomy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when we look at our role as a coach, if we want to help a person with more sustainable, higher quality motivation, there are three areas that we can influence pretty heavily. So competence being, the person's sense of mastery, the person's ability to do the job well. So from a programming standpoint, is our exercise selection appropriate? Is it suitably challenging? Does the person have the capacity to come in and do the thing well, so that the effort that they're putting in is rewarded with progress? And that sort of affectance motivation, that belief that if I put effort in, I'm going to get something out of it, will help nudge them along a little bit. The relatedness element is tying the activity into what else is it connected to. So what is the big goal? What is the big value that's driving it? Who else is benefiting from it? What other impacts does it have? And then the autonomy side of things. And I think the competence and autonomy are probably the two that every personal trainer, every coach can influence. How much engagement or how much involvement does the person have in the process? Is it something that's happening to them, or is it something that's happening with them? I'd say that the review process is probably one of the most underrated and least utilized processes in what we do. A lot of coaches feel that they have to have all the answers and they need to know what the person needs without asking any questions. Whereas I believe in complete opposite. I'm striving for a more collaborative relationship with the client. It's something that's a bit more interdependent, where you see that person as they're the expert in themselves, and they've got really valuable information to bring into this relationship. So that review process serves to provide you with more information that's going to help you refine your service and your product over time. But also, no involvement, no commitment. If the person isn't being asked the question and then being given an opportunity to provide their input, and then being shown from how you respond to that with your service and with your product, that what they said matters, and this is how it's impacted what you've chosen to do, we don't promote autonomy. We might get to the point where there's some independence, where they can go off and do the thing on their own, but that's different to supporting autonomy and providing choice throughout the process.
And it definitely was a fault of mine for a while, because we assume a position of, from the sets, reps, exercise, that sort of realm, we are the expert, and it's really easy to just keep that hat on when it comes to those sorts of things. And it's something that I've noticed a big difference in my business when you include people in that thought process and allowing them to come up with the answer themselves makes a big difference, because then they have more ownership over it, and then it promotes the autonomy and all that.
That ability as a personal trainer to know when to switch from being directive to non-directive. On the gym floor, we want to be, for the most part, very directive. We don't want to be asking an open-ended question that makes them think when they've got a couple 100 kilos on their back. Those short, sharp cues are going to develop intensity and timing and keep people safe. Whereas when we're talking about behavior change or goal setting, switching into a more non-directive approach, where we're asking questions, we're guiding the conversation and allowing people to arrive at their own conclusions and, input their own opinions, is crucial to, promoting motivation.
Absolutely. So that covers a lot there. If taking all that into account, we are 7 weeks into the year at the moment, and it's probably I'm keeping count because I do a weekly tracker for my business, so I know that we're 7 weeks in. and this is my holiday, and it's on the 7th week. But so we're 7 weeks into the year, and I think this point in time is probably more like not necessarily just the 7 weeks, but this period of time is probably the hardest period of time for people that'll either make or break their results for the rest of the year. Not necessarily just for the rest of the year, but New Year's has gone and passed, and the New Year's resolutions, the excitement for that has died off. Sydney's back up and running. Everything's busy again. What advice would you have for people to keep moving forward that are struggling with motivation right now, because it is a hard time? And what do you think people can do to set themselves up for success with their training and health and fitness?
Don't stop, do less.
Yeah, do less, okay.
So what I mean by that is, if you think about everyone setting out their goals,
Yeah,
it's like, right, I'm going to train 4 days a week.
Yeah.
I'm going to eat like this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this, whatever it might be. It's always the top end of the range.
Yeah.
It's if everything goes perfect, then this is what will happen.
Yeah.
And then as the year progresses, things happen, work, life, get sick, whatever it might be, not feeling it this week. And because it can't be perfect, because it can't be the top end of the range, it's like, oh, it's not worth doing then.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with a client recently about momentum.
Yeah.
So for me, momentum's a problem solver.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about how do you keep momentum. Now, I always use the sort of analogy that when you're starting out, it's harder because if you imagine like you got a big rock, trying to push this rock along.
Yeah.
Getting it moving requires a lot of energy.
Yeah.
But at the start, you're pretty motivated to move that rock.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to give this a red hot go.
Yeah.
And then it gets a little bit harder to move it as you go in, and you're not quite as motivated. But you've picked up a bit of speed, and little bumps in the road that would have stopped you earlier on, and now just kind of like you run over them because you've got momentum behind you. Mm-hmm. And keeping that momentum should always be the priority.
Yeah.
So what's the minimum that you need to do to maintain your momentum?
Yeah.
Is that training twice this week? Is it coming in and doing one set?
Yeah.
There's a number of nights where, I train at 6 p.m. Between 6 and 7 I start.
Yeah.
I've usually been working for 12 hours by that point.
Yeah.
I train at home in my garage, which means to train, I've got to go in, I've got to, walk past my bed, my couch, the kitchen table, the fridge, everything else, get changed and head out in the garage and then make myself do the work.
When it's so close and too convenient, it's almost harder than it is to get.
We saw that in COVID.
Yeah.
So everyone was like, "Oh, homework, that's it. That's going to be the thing now." And what we saw is as soon as the gyms opened, everyone redirected, and everyone that I spoke to about it. And one of the things I remember from the coaching calls with my clients over that period is it's very difficult to get out of your comfort zone in your literal comfort zone, which is your home, and having that change of environment, that change of location, which influences the shift in the mindset, is so important to getting yourself into the ritual of doing the work. But trying to remember my point. So
you train at 6 or 7 p.m.
Yeah.
And you got to go past all the easy things to do.
So and we speak about how it's become a habit.
Yeah.
It's become a habit, and what it's become is, but that doesn't mean the resistance isn't still there.
Yeah.
The resistance is still there. I've just got more years of knocking that resistance back behind me.
Yeah.
That it very rarely prevents the work from happening.
Yeah.
And one of the tools there is having flexibility in the goal.
Yeah.
I can go, okay, I'm going to go in and I'm not feeling it today, but I'm going to do my first set.
Yeah.
And I'll see how I feel after that. Or I'm going to do the first exercise and I'll see how I feel after that. Every single time, everything happens. You go in, you do the first set, the rest of the workout goes exactly how it was planned. Often, end up having a better workout than the week before. So giving yourself this sort of goal flexibility so it doesn't become this all or nothing approach, and working within a range. So when life does push and put more on you, then you can pull back, but maintain your your momentum.
Yeah.
So don't stop.
Yeah.
Even if that means doing less for a little bit, don't stop.
Yeah. Because it that's what I always say, like slow, don't stop. Because just keep things in motion, and it always counts as well. Like anything that you do that is, good for you is going to count and add up. There's times where you can overdo it probably when you're like that. I know I've done that before where I shouldn't push and I push too hard and blow myself out of the water.
The only time I've ever, like, if I get, the guys that know me well will make a joke about, I get, last few years, I've got a sty, like, every year. And that's usually, it's pretty hard for me to hide when I'm run down because my first reaction is my eye blows up. I haven't had one in a while, touch wood. I feel like I've learnt my lesson.
Yeah.
But last year I did have one, and I was driving to work, and there was a shadow on the windscreen, and I took the window wipers on and tried to get rid of it. It's still there. I drove a little further and took the window wipers on. It's still there. And then I realised it was my eyelid, and it wasn't on the windscreen at all. And I was like, oh, cool, right, brilliant, going at means. But I don't do a bad job of managing my stress around work.
Yep.
Or, we're going to be talking about this on Friday in development, and I just had a presentation with the leadership team on this idea that pressure's a privilege. Yeah, you got to earn the right to be under pressure. And I feel like I've done a good job of sort of managing that aspect of it. But what I didn't do for a very long time was respect the amount of resources that my body was dedicating to keeping me in the game when work was, demanding more of me.
Yeah.
And I would then go into my training and still want to see the same amount of output and the same amount of results and progress. And it was that combination of trying to demand both performances from myself that would lead me to get run down physically.
Yeah.
And the shift that I've made for myself is just having more flexibility about when to push and pull the intensities or the expectations around when I make progress and when I put something into maintenance. And this played a big difference in that over the last few years, using the biometrics, the Whoop data. And that's been one of the biggest changes with my coaching with my clients.
Yeah.
Over the last few years is I'd say 90% of the guys that I work with now are using one.
Okay.
And, as much as it's going to hurt my ego to say, the Whoop data has probably done more for changing behavioral habits and lifestyle habits with these high-performing guys than high-performing people than anything else that I said or did prior to it. Lawyers coming in who had been doing 80-hour weeks, or business owners telling me about their 100-hour weeks, whatever it might be, and then a few months later, they're like, I got 5 greens in a row, and just raising their awareness through that information, and then helping them to use that information to coach them on deciding when to push and when to pull has been a real game changer for myself and for my clients.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? That is obviously all the other things that you've done have been very beneficial for them as well too. But just you can have these really, really high performing people and adults that are very serious and things like that, and then you see 3 whatever the green little things on your app, and it just
it's where all coaching starts, like raising awareness.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and they're really intangible things to sort of. I think two of the hardest questions to answer is, am I doing too much? Am I doing enough?
Yeah.
And because you make that decision based on how you feel in the moment and paying attention to heart rate variability, resting heart rate, respiratory rate, they can take some of the guesswork out of it. And I'm not saying that it's like everything. There's a continuum. People that are completely reliant on the data that's coming from it and not paying attention to subjectively how they feel. There's times I ignore what it says, because of my own understanding of my body. But when you're trying to initially raise a person's awareness of the impact of sleeping 6 hours a night or less, or the impact of 3, 4, 5 drinks on an evening, or the impact the work is having or even just sickness, training through being sick, having that sort of objective data there to help people communicate to you where they're at, raise their awareness, and then make more informed decisions. It's something that we didn't have for a long time, and it's something I found really beneficial over the last few years.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of the subjective things that people want to feel and achieve, and like it kind of lives in that objective data, so that you can have that more informed decisions on the insights that you have. That's one thing that I've implemented a lot more recently, and try to communicate to my clients that, you know, you want to feel and you want to look this way, and that is somewhat subjective. But, you know, I think because you're talking about the person themselves, it's hard for them to zoom out and just have a higher level view of, cool, this is the data, this is kind of where you're at. This gives you that subjective feeling that you have right now. And if we can manipulate these things, then you're probably going to get that feeling that you want. But it's really, really hard for people to pull away from that.
Yeah. So many of their, beliefs are wired into, or part of their identity. Like working hard means this.
Yeah.
Or, I can't think of another example, but that questioning that comes from when you don't have that information, and it's a matter of, I'm going into a session today and I don't quite feel like it. You're either going to push through and get the work done when you shouldn't, or you're going to push through and get the work done when you should. But either way, having that information to sort of say, okay, I'm not just letting myself off today and being wimping out on it. I'm going to go in and I'm going to modify the intensity. I just think it helps make decisions and take some of that thought process out.
Absolutely. And also, like, one session that is, that are more of a recovery session or modified in the grand scheme of things of however many sessions you get in a year makes...
because the goal is consistency, right?
Yeah.
The goal is staying in the game. Yeah. It's that momentum.
Yeah. But it's easy to, if you don't have that objective data, to be like, oh, cool, this session is going to be that, so that the next 5 to 10 sessions are going to be way above where it should be. Yeah. Or you could try to push too hard on that session, then blow yourself out of the water, and then the next 5 to 10 sessions be a negative.
Yeah, and then 100% people can get to the point where they can self-regulate.
Yeah.
But in the process of learning how to self-regulate, having that information to say, yeah, that was the right call, or influence whether it was the right call or not, I think is really beneficial.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, you would do it in a business, why would you not do it, or whatever it might be?
Can't manage what you don't measure, right?
That's it. As cliche as that is. Okay. What else have we got, mate? Anything else? I've got a couple other questions here. You want to talk about anything else?
No, I'm happy to follow your lead, mate.
Cool, mate. Cool. Well, on that, we touched on the SDT, self-determination theory, and a couple of little things on measuring, I guess, objective data, so you can have more informed decisions about what you're doing, and moving more towards the coaching side of it. So you've been a PT for a long time now, and you obviously have a big influence on a lot of personal trainers across the company and probably outside of the company as well too. What advice would you have for someone starting out as a PT or a couple of years into their career as a personal trainer? What do you think things are that they need to do to help them be better?
Big question. This is pretty much my whole job.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I spend the majority of my time trying to sort of answer this question. The program that we've put together, is trying to solve some of the common issues that we have seen in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
If you think, until really recently, the rent model was probably the most prominent.
Mm-hmm.
It might still be, but there's definitely been a switch away from it. Most prominent in the industry, but I feel like it's backwards.
Mm-hmm.
So, the rent model is great when you are an experienced coach with a developed network and confidence in systems, processes, and your technical capacities. Also a certain level of life experience as well.
Yeah.
But the way I see it is to be able to be good at generating your own business, you have to have the confidence to be able to communicate your capacity at helping a person with your product and your service.
Yeah.
To gain the confidence to be able to communicate it, you need some experience doing the thing.
Yeah.
And that's why I see the rent model as the other way around. Because as soon as you get in, you need to be able to generate your own business first in order to have some clients to build your confidence in it. So I see it as being flipped.
That was a big reason why I started here, because I was like, I know I can't do that with the information that I have and the level that I have at the moment, the experience level.
It's a difficult. I see it as being a difficult starting point.
Yeah.
You kind of, and I'm not knocking the model. It works for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But I think when you're starting out, it can be one of the more difficult ways to start out. The second thing on top of that is I think the role itself has evolved quite a lot, and the demands or expectations around what a personal trainer is or what a personal trainer does has certainly evolved. And the courses or the traditional sort of like Cert 3, Cert 4 doesn't do enough to prepare people for the reality of being a business owner and just the emotional sort of load that comes from being responsible for 20 to 30 adults' kind of hopes and dreams.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot involved in it, so there's a lot of different skills. And I think that it takes time to get good across a lot of different things. And I think the rate that you're introduced to the information or the timing that you're introduced to the information is really important. So we've tried to create a process which is designed for coaches by coaches, which is why I think we're, doing something that many other places aren't. What we've put together is what we think would have been, the best start possible, when we had the opportunity to.
Yeah, for sure.
And what we've learned along the way, because we haven't always had the resources to do what we're doing now.
Yeah.
And we certainly haven't got it right every step of the way, but I hope that, we've learned from what we've encountered previously. And I think where we're at now with the Elevated Coach program, it's the best start that we've ever offered our coaches. And the reason being is, we can provide them some financial security with a salary at first. So rather than earning when they've got clients, they have stability while they're building, so that when they become a subcontractor, they're not building their client base. They're starting with clients from day one. So obviously being a subcontractor is a whole lot of different pressures.
Yeah.
If you're not working, you're not getting paid. You got to take care of your own superannuation. You got to take care of your own annual leave, so on,
and all that sort of stuff.
It's a fair bit of responsibility. Yeah. So, we want to try and reduce some of that stress early on.
Yep.
I don't think that coaches that are in a make or break situation are really bringing the best to the table. So we provide that. And then on top of that, we got a pre-induction now. So information from systems and processes that we think people need when they start out on day one. We've got a very heavily practical based induction, which teaches core skills like how to do a good phone call, how to do a good consultation, how to sit down and communicate to someone, what your service and your product costs. And these aren't necessarily the skills that are associated with becoming accredited to be a personal trainer, but they're the actuality of running a business and getting people in front of you.
Absolutely. That was one of the biggest things that I struggled with initially, because I really enjoy training, and I went really hard in on learning as much as I could from a training standpoint, but it doesn't matter if you haven't got clients in front of you to coach.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people get into the industry because we like training and we're interested in it and the physical side of it, but the systems and processes outside of it, like the communication, having a phone call and stuff like that, and then the consultation, and still to this day, those are things that I persist to work on, because those are the things that I think for a lot of people that go into the fitness industry just don't think are going to be as much of a thing. So it's a big thing to see, it's really, really cool to see how far the process has gone from when I started 7 years ago to where it is at now. And even then, when it was 7 years ago, it's probably as good as it could have been, and it was really, really good. But then to have everything on top of it now makes a big, big difference.
Yeah, that's the goal, mate. And people like yourself have been hugely influential in developing what we've got now. I've always believed that everyone that comes in through the door should have the opportunity to be better than the last person because they've got more people helping them, and they got more information at their disposal. Sort of circling back around at the question, I think the environment that you choose to learn in or work in are really important to the potential success that you'll have. I think the information that you're exposed to is important that you get the timing right.
Mm-hmm.
So making sure that the business owner and the business generation, the ability to generate your own business, those aspects are something that takes place early on.
Yeah.
In our environment, we're really lucky to have very capable, strong brand, capable marketing team, great membership teams who are able to help put clients in front of coaches while they're developing the skills to be able to generate business for themselves. They can also be generating time on the tools to gain the confidence to be able to communicate, how to generate business for themselves. So I think that's really important. One of the things I love about our environment is that we've worked really hard, or one of the biggest wins, I think, of our culture over the last 9 years is we have this knowledge share environment.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go back to that sort of typical sort of rent model environment, the person next to you is also your competitor. They're not just your colleague, and it can become quite territorial. And then that means that your growth, your exposure is simply just what you do and what you invest your time into, and you go into courses and you're listening and stuff. But in an environment like ours, I think the quality of the coaches that have come from it quite as quick, in a relatively short period of time, is because everyone is willing to share a strength and everyone is willing to explore a weakness.
Mm-hmm.
The team development sessions are a really, even though they've been around for a really long time, they're a great example of how people are still willing to be in a room and support that person in, developing that skill set and, learning how to talk or present content, but then just soaking up everything else that's around them, which makes it more likely that they're going to go ask that person for help.
Mm-hmm.
Or somewhere else along the line. So I think getting an environment like that where where what is or could be quite a individual role, working as a PT within a gym, you still have that sort of sense of team, you still have that sense of community. And then, you've got the actual skill sets that goes into it. How do you choose which skill sets to prioritize when? I mean, you've obviously got to have a really solid foundation in exercise selection,
Mm-hmm.
and movement assessment, and initial sort of programming. And then from there, looking at your ability to communicate, I think that should be, your ability to hold a coaching conversation should be right up there.
Yeah.
And the business elements too, so understanding what it takes to be successful in a business, and beyond that, just whatever you're interested in.
Yeah.
I get coaches a lot saying, what books should I read, or what course should I go on? And the beautiful thing about what we do is pretty much whatever you upskill yourself in is going to benefit your clients.
Yeah.
If you are interested right now in nutrition, do a nutrition course.
Yeah.
If you are interested right now in communication, pick up a motivational interviewing book. Or go on an S&C course. Like over time, it's all going to be useful. And I really believe that the days of helping one type of client do one thing are gone, or going. I personally don't see the future of personal training being a series of niches like the health professional industry.
Mm-hmm.
I know that goes against everything every social media business guru is going to tell you, that you got a niche from day one.
Yeah.
But and I do understand the consistencies in tone and marketing are important. You shouldn't try to talk to everyone. You shouldn't try to appeal to everyone. But if you're trying to niche on day one, all you're doing is excluding people,
Yeah.
or potentially polishing strengths that you already have.
Yeah.
Whereas, the goal is to work with people for a long period of time, right?
Yeah.
There's and if you're going to work with someone for, I mean, you've had clients for what, 7 years, the whole time you've been there.
Yeah.
I get some people that are approaching like 9 years with me.
Yeah.
And what we work on now is not what they were working on day one. Over that period in time, you're going to help someone. You look good. You're going to help them come back from an injury. You're going to help them prevent injuries. You might take them through a pregnancy. You might help them with some performance goals, run a race, in a marathon, have a fight, whatever it might be. And I do think that as more of this stuff becomes available and people are in a position to pay a nutritionist, see a chiro, go to all these different people, there needs to be, and they're getting all this information through their apps, or whatever else it might be. I think that a coach, a personal trainer is going to become this person that helps the individual to link all this information together and make sense of it.
Mm-hmm.
How does what the nutritionist and the physio and therapist and whatever else is telling me all come together into how do I feel good, look good, perform at my best. So I see coaches being this sort of excellent generalist, along the way, which is something which everyone's probably heard me say previously, but it is something that I really do believe in, and a big part of any success that I've had. When I started out fitness playground as it was by then, I had calisthenics clients, I had weight loss clients, I had people that did boxing, I had injury rehab. I've ended up working with a number of different special populations, NDIS, people in their late 80s, because of that sort of mentality of I want the whole spectrum.
Yeah, and that was, I was, as you were saying all that was one of the things that I was trying to remember. I remember you posted the excellent generalist, you said. And I think that's one thing, like looking back at all of the clients that I've worked with, very much the same or very similar in that I've trained kids from 10 years old. I think the oldest client I had was 83 years old, and everything in between, like body comp, injury rehab, mums that are 50 years old and all those sorts of things, and then really, really high level athletes that doing high level triathlons. And one of my clients I mentioned a few weeks ago walked from Canada to Mexico. Yeah. Yeah, but it's crazy. I'm going to have him on here.
Yeah,
He's
get him
a
on.
bit of a psycho.
Yeah, listen to that. Wow.
He also did. Who was I saying that to this morning? I was saying this morning. Someone I was having a call, and they'd set a goal. It was my sister actually. She set a goal for the Sydney Marathon. She wants to do a 10K, and then she was like, "Oh, well, I might actually be in Hawaii." I was like, "Do the 10K in Hawaii. Just do it on the date. Like, do that." My client, he was meant to run a ultra marathon in 2020 in New Zealand, and then it got called off because of COVID. So he ran it around Centennial Park by himself, 160 Ks.
160 Ks.
Yeah, by himself around Centennial Park.
Mate, I did a half marathon round there in COVID, and that was the absolute extent of my running around Centennial Park capacity.
Yeah, I never ran around it, but that would be a lot of running, and he did 160 Ks. But a wide range of clients. You get a broader perspective of what you can do and learn learn so many different things. And I think as well from obviously the goal for clients will change relative to the client, but for the most part, the human body will work in a very similar way across all of those clients. And if you can understand key concepts of exercise selection and programming and energy systems and things like that, you can then positively impact their training. And I think when you see the trainers that have that approach to taking most people on and learning different goals and things like that, and learning how to program for different goals, that they usually end up with the better skill set and can, just help a wider variety of people.
Yeah.
There was one thing when I started, there were, a few clients that would come through and someone was like, oh, have you worked with a client with this injury? I know you've worked with this injury before. Have you done this with the lower back? And I was like, nope, but I'll give it a good shot. I
Figure
reckon.
it out.
Yeah,
Right?
I reckon I can. And I've got a network around me. And to your point of being in a good environment with a good culture makes a big, big difference. Like a lot of my learning for a good couple of years was from one of the developments that we would have at Fitness Playground, and then the conversations that I would have outside of that on those concepts and different case studies. If you've got 30 clients yourself, but then 3 or 4 of your mates that you really get on with and have a very similar view to, or even a different view to you, they have 30 clients as well too. So then you can get a perspective of 120 people.
Growth exponential.
Yeah, that's the thing, and that makes a big difference in terms of linking those pieces of information together, because I think there's definitely a need for reading more about it and actually genuinely be interested in consuming knowledge of whichever way that is for people. Some people it's podcasts, or hopefully it's this podcast and YouTube videos and books and things like that. But then once you can start to see, oh, that links with that links with that, whatever it might be, I think that makes a big, big difference. And from seeing coaches have gone on to be probably a bit more successful with helping a wider variety of clients, or the ones that kind of pigeonhole themselves a little bit, you can see the difference, I think.
Yeah, and I also don't have any thing against people who do have a niche.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I just think it should find you.
Yeah.
You shouldn't force it.
Yeah.
Force it. Force it.
Yeah.
I just think you shouldn't force it. A niche will find you when you become known for doing a particular thing really well.
Yeah.
And double down on that, but not in your first. I'd say, I would say 5 years, but at least certainly not in your first 3.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're good at.
Yeah.
Get yourself some exposure to as many types of clients and types of goals, but also just from a job satisfaction standpoint, if you're going to be in the industry for a long time, there aren't that many people now that I work with where the technical solution of how to get this person what they want is what's going to challenge me.
Yeah.
I know what exercises are going to be beneficial. I can address most movements and what's required to help someone train well and safely. But it is the different people and the different types of people and the different goals and motivators that keeps me curious and keeps me interested, and what is why I'm still on the gym for.
Yeah, because you don't really need to be. You're busy enough.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's a choice.
Yeah.
I think it's important when you're leading a group of coaches to be. I'm not saying it's something I'm going to be able to do forever, but I think being on the gym floor and demonstrating you walk the walk and you're keeping the act sharp, and from a personal standpoint, we go back to our self-determination theory element. I start my every day with a good bout of competence. I get up and I get in and I get to do the thing that I've become the best at.
Yeah.
Which has a great knock-on effect down the line. But yeah, it's where the curiosity lies, is in the individual person and how you're going to apply what works to all an infinitely different number of people.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the classic, and if you have such a narrow view of it, because if you've cut yourself off from working with a lot of different people, it's a classic. If you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and you'll just apply the one thing. Whereas if you have a wide view and you enjoy doing it, then you'll start to be able to link things together a lot better. Which actually, on that, I need to show you it's on my phone, so I can't show you any other way until we're done, a comparison photo of a client with back pain that I had last week that I think you'll appreciate. Cool, mate. We've been going for a while. Probably one of the most important questions. I know you're a Manchester boy. What's your favourite Bugsy Malone song? You're a Bugsy fan, yeah?
Yeah. Is it Ordinary People? The one where he talks about, is it which he talks about?
Ordinary People.
Yeah, I like that. That's a
Yeah.
good track. He's my every Monday when I'm doing my boxing session. That's my artist
Bugsy.
right there.
Nice.
There's a few good. I can't remember the names off the top of my head. You know when you have something just on a playlist.
Yeah.
But I think Ordinary People's
Yeah.
is the one that kind of really got me into him. And I think there's one called Welcome to the Hood.
Yes, yeah.
Because of how absolutely gangster I am.
Yeah,
you know, really.
absolutely.
It's just a well written song. Nice little bout of aggression.
Yeah.
To get you going.
Yeah, that's one of my favourites. My favourite probably be. I liked. What's the Skeletons off that album with Welcome to the Hood.
Is it the one with Die by the Gun as well?
That was the Ordinary People one.
Yeah,
I like that. I like the Die by the Gun.
Yeah, I think those were the two songs of his that I sort of like came across first.
Yeah.
Just he's good. King of the North.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, the North Face is one of my favourites as well too. Yeah. Right, man. That'll probably do us for today.
Right,
Thank you so much for coming on.
Absolute pleasure.
I had a good time. How have we gone for time? We're about an hour and a half now. Yeah. You might be the longest podcast yet.
All right, mate.
Yeah.
Well, that's a record.
Yeah, it is. Mate, that was good.
All right, Bob.
Legend.